What if I told you that in parts of the world where Catholicism was once almost invisible, it's now becoming the dominant faith? That churches which once stood nearly empty now ring with the sound of Mass every day? And that in 5 unlikely countries, Catholicism is spreading so fast, it's rewriting the religious future of entire nations? This isn't a prophecy. It's already happening. Across jungles, cities, and campuses, we're witnessing a quiet revolution of faith. From underground churches in China to roaring cathedrals in Nigeria, Catholicism is not just growing, it's exploding. And in this documentary, we're counting down the top 5 countries where this explosion is most dramatic. Stay with us through the end, because the number 1 country on this list might just change how you see the church's future. Let's begin the countdown. 5. South Korea, from mission territory to mission powerhouse asterisk. Less than 100 years ago, Catholics in South Korea were a tiny minority, often persecuted and misunderstood. But today, the Catholic Church in South Korea is thriving, with over 5.5 million Catholics, vibrant seminaries, and growing influence in public life. It began with courage. In the late 18th century, Catholicism entered Korea not by foreign missionaries, but by Korean scholars who encountered Christian texts in China. They brought the faith home with them in secret and with great risk. The first Korean Catholics were self-taught and self-led. Their devotion was deep, but it cost them everything. Persecution soon followed. Thousands were martyred, including entire families. Yet their stories didn't disappear. They became legend and the seedbed of faith for future generations. Fast forward to the 20th century. After the Korean War, Catholic missionaries, especially from France and the United States, helped rebuild a shattered nation. They offered not only sacraments but education, medical care, and a sense of hope. Catholic schools became places of transformation, and hospitals a symbol of the Church's healing mission. South Korea's church is unique in how it blends deep intellectual tradition with youthful energy. Today, it boasts some of the most sophisticated theology departments in Asia, including the Catholic University of Korea, as well as thriving lay movements such as the Legion of Mary and charismatic prayer groups. In Seoul, youth pilgrimages to shrines like Gyeoldusan, where many early martyrs were executed, have become rites of passage. The Korean bishops have embraced media as well, with Catholic TV channels, podcasts, and YouTube evangelists reaching young audiences in ways that are both modern and faithful. In 2014, Pope Francis visited South Korea and drew over 1 million people for an open-air mass in Seoul. The trip was a turning point, not only in international visibility, but in national pride among Korean Catholics. He beatified 124 martyrs, reminding the world that Korea's church was born from blood and sacrifice. Vocations continue to flourish. South Korea sends missionaries to Africa, Latin America, and even Europe, a reversal of history that shows how mature and mission-oriented this church has become. One cannot ignore the cultural impact either. Korean Catholics are prominent in every field, from politics to arts. Devout actors, musicians, and public figures openly share their faith. Even K-pop stars have been seen attending Mass or referencing their Catholic beliefs. But what sets the Korean church apart is its fidelity. Unlike some Western countries where church teaching is often diluted, Korean Catholics generally embrace the fullness of doctrine. Mass attendance is high, confession lines are long, and devotion to the Eucharist is central. There is also a deep Marian spirit. Koreans have a strong connection to the Virgin Mary, especially through the title of Our Lady of Korea. Marian shrines such as Namyeong and Naeju, despite some controversy, attract thousands of pilgrims each year. Perhaps most powerfully, South Korea's faith is not confined to its borders. Korean missionaries now serve in over 80 countries, often in dangerous or underserved regions. The Korean church understands that to be Catholic is to be universal, and they're living it. In a country that once knew only persecution and secrecy, Catholicism has become a light on a hill, bold, beautiful, and globally engaged. South Korea isn't just a success story. It's a model of what happens when martyrdom, education, and mission combine to create a church that doesn't just survive, it transforms. And this is just the beginning. For Nigeria, the beating heart of African Catholicism. In the heart of West Africa, the Catholic Church in Nigeria is experiencing one of the most awe-inspiring surges of faith in the modern world. Today, Nigeria is home to over 32 million Catholics, a number that continues to grow at an astonishing pace. But behind the numbers is a story of strength, resilience, and joy in the face of unimaginable hardship. The church in Nigeria is young and vibrantly alive. Walk into any Sunday Mass and you'll hear drums, singing, clapping, and the powerful voice of a congregation that knows the gospel isn't just read, it's lived. But what makes Nigeria's growth so remarkable is the context in which it's happening. For decades, the church has stood as a beacon of unity and truth amid deep national divisions. In a country split along ethnic and religious lines, with significant tension between Christian and Muslim populations, the Catholic Church plays a central role in peace-building and social cohesion. Priests and bishops are not just spiritual leaders. They are often frontline mediators, community organizers, and public defenders. Sadly, this leadership comes at a cost. In recent years, priests have been kidnapped and killed, churches have been bombed, and faithful communities have suffered under the weight of terror attacks, especially in northern regions. And yet they come. They come by the thousands. They gather in fields, under trees, in homes and cathedrals, hungry for the Word, the Eucharist, and the sacraments. In fact, Nigeria has one of the highest rates of Mass attendance in the world, with over 90% of Catholics attending weekly. Vocational growth is equally astounding. Nigeria produces more seminarians than nearly any other country, and these young men are not just filling local parishes. They are now being sent as missionaries to serve dioceses in the United States, the UK, and across Europe. The Church's social outreach is immense. Catholic schools are educating a new generation of leaders. Catholic hospitals and clinics provide care in places where government aid never reaches. Orphanages, shelters, and food programs are run almost entirely by the Church. And at the heart of it all is a deep and contagious joy. You can hear it in the singing. You can feel it in the processions. You can see it in the faces of children receiving First Communion, and in the tears of parents as their sons are ordained. This is not a faith inherited. It is a faith embraced, often at great personal cost. In cities like Lagos, Abuja, and Onitsha, cathedrals burst with faithful attendees. Parish youth groups organize daily rosaries, community outreach, and vocations drives. The charismatic renewal movement is thriving, drawing young adults into a life of prayer and evangelization. And beyond the church walls, Nigerian Catholics are influencing politics, media, and academia, often standing up for life, family, and religious freedom. In many ways, Nigeria represents the future of Catholicism, a future that is bold, deeply sacramental, rooted in tradition, and joyfully alive. Despite the darkness it has faced, or perhaps because of it, the church in Nigeria burns brighter than ever. It is quite literally a church on fire, and the world is starting to take notice. 3. Vietnam, a quiet revolution of faith. Amid the backdrop of Vietnam's rapid modernization, bustling cities, and deep-rooted traditions lies a quiet miracle, the unshakable rise of Catholicism. With over 7 million Catholics, Vietnam holds one of the largest Catholic populations in Asia, and though it represents just under 10% of the population, its influence is far greater than the numbers suggest. Catholicism in Vietnam has survived war, communism, state surveillance, and cultural pressure. And yet, through it all, the faith has not just endured, it has flourished. The story begins in the 16th century, when Portuguese and French missionaries first arrived on Vietnamese shores. Over the centuries, Catholicism took root deeply, often at the cost of persecution. Thousands of Vietnamese martyrs gave their lives for the faith, many of whom were canonized by Pope John Paul II in 1988. These martyrs are not forgotten. Their stories are told in homes, schools, and churches across the country. Every Vietnamese Catholic child grows up knowing the names of saints like Saint Andrew Dung Lac, Saint Paul Le Boutin, and others whose blood became the seed of the church. Today, despite government control over religious expression, Catholic life in Vietnam is thriving. Parishes are packed. Masses are often held outdoors to accommodate the overflowing crowds. Catechism classes are full, and youth groups are buzzing with energy. In cities like Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi, major cathedrals serve as spiritual oases, places of beauty, stillness, and strength in the midst of urban noise. The vibrancy isn't limited to cities. In rural villages, where roads are often poor and infrastructure is lacking, villagers will walk for hours to attend Massachusetts priests travel on motorcycles, boats, or even on foot to reach the faithful scattered across rice fields and mountain paths. One remarkable aspect of Vietnamese Catholicism is its strong family foundation. Faith is passed down with reverence. Grandparents teach the rosary, parents lead bedtime prayers. Children grow up attending daily mass, understanding sacrifice, and cherishing the church. Religious vocations are also surging. Vietnam is now one of the top exporters of priests and religious sisters in the world. Many Vietnamese missionaries serve in the US, France, and Australia, where declining vocations are met with this new spiritual fire. Vietnamese Catholics have a deep Marian devotion. Pilgrimage sites like the Our Lady of La Vang Shrine draw millions of faithful every year. The story of Our Lady's appearance to persecuted Catholics in the jungle, offering healing and hope, is central to the national Catholic imagination. It is no exaggeration to say that Mary is seen as the mother of Vietnam. Her image graces every Catholic home, and her protection is invoked during times of illness, decision-making, and political uncertainty. Despite state restrictions, Vietnamese Catholics have found creative ways to evangelize. Social media is used to share gospel reflections, organize prayer groups, and live-stream liturgies. Underground Catholic podcasts and online catechesis courses help nourish the faith of younger generations. And young they are. The average age of a Vietnamese Catholic is under 30. This youth-driven church is intellectually curious, spiritually disciplined, and socially engaged. Young people participate in acts of charity, visit the elderly, clean churches, and organize praise nights. In many ways, Vietnam's church reflects a resurrected faith, one that has walked through fire and come out more radiant. Speaks softly, but it stands tall. It doesn't grab headlines, but it shapes hearts. And it reminds us, true growth doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it whispers through the faithful perseverance of a praying people. Vietnam may be quiet, but its faith is roaring. 2. Papua New Guinea, faith in the forests. Nestled among some of the world's most diverse and remote landscapes, the island nation of Papua New Guinea is quietly experiencing one of the most extraordinary Catholic revivals in the Southern Hemisphere. With over 2 million Catholics, the faith is not just growing, it's being woven into the very fabric of village life, culture, and tradition. Catholicism first arrived in the late 19th century, carried by missionary orders such as the Missionaries of the Sacred Heart and the Divine Word Missionaries. These missionaries braved wild terrain, tropical disease, and cultural barriers to plant seeds of faith in some of the most isolated places on Earth. But those seeds took root. And today, the church in Papua New Guinea is not just surviving, it's leading. In a country where over 850 distinct languages are spoken and many communities are still accessible only by boat or on foot, the Catholic Church plays a unique unifying role. Mass in Papua New Guinea is a deeply communal and vibrant event. Picture this: villagers arriving by canoe, dressed in traditional attire, singing hymns with drums and bamboo instruments. The liturgy is alive, an integration of Catholic tradition and local culture. Faith here isn't limited to Sunday, permeates the week. In villages, it's not uncommon for entire communities to gather each morning and evening for communal rosary. Catechists, many of whom are lay leaders trained by the church, walk hours from village to share scripture and prepare people for sacraments. The role of the church in education is massive. Catholic schools serve tens of thousands of children across remote regions, offering not only academics but moral formation. For many children, their local Catholic school is the only chance at literacy and hope for a better life. Healthcare, too, is deeply influenced by the church. In areas where no government clinics exist, it is Catholic-run health posts, mobile medical units, and religious sisters who provide vaccinations, maternal care, and emergency aid. And while priest shortages are a global issue, Papua New Guinea is producing its own clergy. Local vocations are on the rise, with young men entering seminaries in growing numbers. Religious sisters, too, are becoming powerful voices in education, healthcare, and social justice. Challenges remain. Papua New Guinea struggles with poverty, domestic violence, and corruption. But the church doesn't shy away. Instead, it serves as a prophetic voice, advocating for the rights of women, the dignity of the poor, and ethical governance. Environmental justice is also becoming a Catholic cause. With the country's lush rainforests and rich biodiversity under threat from mining and logging, Catholic leaders have joined hands with indigenous communities to protect their land, echoing Pope Francis' call in Laudato Si. Above all, the faith in Papua New Guinea is a faith of joy. The joy of baptism in a river surrounded by forest. The joy of First Communion celebrated with food, song, and village dancing. The joy of elderly catechists still walking barefoot to bring the gospel to the next hill. This is a church not built on stone, but on spirit. In the forests of Papua New Guinea, the gospel is not just being preached. It's being lived, with simplicity, courage, and celebration. And it's growing faster than most realize. From a handful of missionaries to millions of faithful, the Catholic story of Papua New Guinea is a living testimony that the Holy Spirit moves powerfully in places the world often overlooks. 1. China, the underground church that won't die. In a land known for its Great Wall, it's what lies underground that might just be the greatest spiritual fortress of all. China is home to one of the most mysterious, persecuted, and fastest-growing Catholic populations in the world. Estimates vary due to government restrictions and lack of open data, but the number of Chinese Catholics is believed to be between 12 to 15 million and climbing. What's even more remarkable is that much of this growth is happening under pressure, in silence, and often in secret. The story of Catholicism in China is a saga of survival. The church first took root in the 13th century through missionaries like John of Montecorvino and was later reintroduced in full force by Jesuits such as Matteo Ricci in the 16th century. These early missionaries adapted to Chinese culture, studied the language, and engaged scholars in dialogue, leaving a powerful legacy. But modern Chinese history has not been kind to religion. Following the Communist Revolution in 1949, religion was heavily suppressed. Churches were destroyed, clergy were arrested, and Catholicism was forced underground. Two churches emerged: the official, state-recognized Patriotic Catholic Association, and the underground church that remained loyal to the Pope. Despite decades of surveillance, arrests, and propaganda, the underground church did not disappear. In fact, it grew. In home chapels, in whispered prayers, in coded symbols, Chinese Catholics preserved the sacraments, taught catechism, and passed on the faith, often at great risk. Priests operated covertly. Bishops were ordained in secret. The Eucharist was celebrated behind closed doors. Today, this underground church remains a spiritual marvel, one of grit, devotion, and supernatural endurance. Recent years have brought complex tensions between the Vatican and the Chinese government. A controversial agreement in 2018 attempted to bridge the divide between underground and state-recognized Catholics, but many remain cautious. Trust is fragile. Surveillance continues, and believers are still imprisoned. And yet, the church grows. New converts are being baptized. Religious vocations are quietly increasing. Chinese youth, searching for identity in a culture dominated by consumerism and nationalism, are finding meaning in the gospel. The Catholic Church in China is also deeply intellectual. Catholic universities, though state-monitored, host vibrant theological discussions. Catholic social doctrine is studied quietly but passionately by scholars hungry for moral truth in a rapidly changing society. In rural regions, lay-led catechism flourishes. Women, especially, are playing an increasing role in leadership, organizing underground prayer circles and teaching children. China's church has also become more global. Chinese Catholics living abroad are forming strong diaspora communities in the US, Canada, and Europe, often revitalizing local parishes and bringing with them a faith forged in fire. While the persecution remains real, There is a boldness that cannot be silenced. Chinese Catholics understand what it means to carry a cross. They have walked through the shadow of death and still sing Alleluia. They know the value of a whispered mass, a hidden rosary, a Bible passed hand to hand. And they remind us that the church is never about buildings. It's about bodies gathered in belief, no matter the cost. So why is China number one on our list? Because in the darkest corners of modern history, the light of Christ continues to burn. And nowhere does it burn more mysteriously or more beautifully than in the underground Church of China. These believers may not have public cathedrals, but they have something just as powerful: unshakable faith. So what do these 5 countries have in common? They are not the wealthiest. They don't have the biggest cathedrals. And most of them face deep political, social, or spiritual challenges. But what they do have is something more powerful: hunger. A hunger for God. A hunger for truth. A hunger for something greater than themselves. These nations remind us that the church does not rise and fall with popularity. It rises and falls with passion. And in these unlikely corners of the world, passion is igniting hearts, lighting candles, and echoing bells in places we never expected. From digital rosaries in Seoul, to Eucharistic adoration in jungle villages, to whispered masses in Chinese homes, the Spirit is moving. And if we listen closely, we can hear the call. The church is alive, not just in Rome or New York, but in the heartbeats of the faithful in Lagos, Lavang, Port Moresby, and Beijing. If this documentary inspired you, don't just stop here. Pray for these nations, support missionary work, and most of all, rekindle the fire in your own faith. Because revival doesn't just happen out there. It can begin right here with you. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who still believes that miracles are happening right now. And if you've made it to the end, comment below, "The church is alive," so we know you're part of this movement. Until next time, stay blessed and keep the faith burning.